After 50 years, the wait is over. John Byrne returns to the X-Men and continues where his legendary run left off. Or does he? In Volume 1 of X-Men Elsewhen, the Dark Phoenix Saga is over, and Phoenix is alive? All new, all different. X-Men Elsewhen Volume 1 by John Byrne with Paul Wills, edited by Chris Ryall.
Hey everybody, this is PD from the Spin Rack, and today is a day, well actually it was days ago. The news is old news, but at the same time, remember when I brought you my bootleg X-Men Elsewhen, remember? And it had all of the pencils and some nice people on the internet. They put together a template that you could use to do this, and you could buy some of these online. Actually, you could go see these same pencils on online also. But at the same time, the editor, Chris Ryall, used to be at IDW, put it together for us. He got a deal with Marvel Arts, and we finally got the first volume of X-Men Elsewhen, inked by John Byrne, and I think it's co-inked by, some pages are done by Pat Mills. Is that who this is? Pat Wills, right? Paul Wills, sorry. My mistake, Paul Wills. My mistake on that. And this is his return to the new X-Men, right? The old X-Men will appear at some point, but this was his return to the new X-Men. Now, you have to imagine many moons ago, this is actually a new picture from the late 90s that Byrne drew, and he kind of inked it so it'd be similar, but not exactly the same. And it has all of the classic Byrne and Austin with Chris Claremont writing and scripting in here too. So there were two, well actually there's a bunch of essential volumes. There are two volumes with Byrne and Austin, including who was it, Dave Cockerman, the first one, of course, because he did the giant size. So it's some of our most classic work. But one of the things that I don't think people point out is when the X-Men got hot, right? Because this is constantly pointed out by Byrne mostly, that the X-Men wasn't a big seller. It was a big book in the direct market. So that's when the idea that it was going to be a graphic novel, this idea that graphic novel could have been the Days of Future Past, that sort of thing. And that was floating around that this was going to happen. And there was such a buzz around this book. When Byrne left, the book shot up to #1 with Dave Cockrum on the book. But at the same time, the back issues of these started selling like hotcakes. Like in the Dave Cockrum issues, and obviously Giant Size and X-Men 94, legendary, but also Byrne's first issue of the X-Men in Iron Fist, Byrne's first drawing of the X-Men in Spider-Man Team Up. That was big. But by the time this was really happening for the X-Men and Byrne's X-Men, he was already gone. And during his time with Chris Claremont, and they were working on books like Iron Fist and Marvel Team Up, and they became the quintessential team, artist and writer team. And then when you had Archie Goodwin decide to put Byrne with Terry Austin on the X-Men, we got this classic team of X-Men, X-Men creators that went on and they're very much influenced by Neil Adams in their own different ways. Obviously, Terry would be on different ways because he worked with Neil Adams. Byrne was very much inspired by Neil Adams' art, and Chris Claremont was very much inspired by the stories that Roy and Neil were doing in the X-Men. So you had all these people that were fans of the X-Men. Byrne and Austin were fans of the original X-Men, but they were definitely fans of Dave Cockrum's work. So in joining it, even though, who is it? I think Terry Austin said, who are these new guys? It's almost sacrilegious to have these guys who weren't X-Men running around with the X-Men's name. So, but we all know through the connection. Chris Claremont called it a marriage. And of course, in any kind of thing where these two were, butting heads on the creative end, as has been said many a times, they differed enough where at some point Byrne got to the two issues that he was plotting, which was 139 and 140, and he was the sole plotter on those issues. I think they say he came up with Chris Claremont came up with the kitty scene, but basically the main plot was from Byrne, and those issues have some of the things besides the Colossus page. I don't think there's a Colossus page in here. I think it is. Oops, that's interesting. So we have what is said to be the image that broke them, this rage picture of Colossus. But there's a lot of stuff in these two issues that Byrne was having issue with. It was supposed to be a delayed picking of the who was going to be the leader with Cyclops gone, and that subplot wasn't even a subplot. So that was one bit that was gone. What else? Is there anything else in here? I think everything else is. Oh no! Then Byrne was like, oh, another Jean Grey scene over here. Nightcrawler, envisioning seeing the sunset and thinking about Jean. So he's like, that's kind of not how we plotted it. And then what else? I think one of these pages, Kitty says she's a genius. I think, and then they had a big fight at the end of this. Is that the Wendigo was supposed to be George Baptiste. He was going to jail, but then they said he might get time off or something like that. Byrne was like, that's not how the Canadian courts work. And at the same time, there was a big buzz around Snowbird and Wolverine. But they was like saying, ooh, romance between them. So there's a bunch of things that happened, and ultimately they left. And at the same time, I think Byrne had kind of fallen out of love with the new X-Men. And though the X-Men in general, he kind of stayed away as best he could. And he only stuck his toe in a couple times. And Heroes, Heroes for Hope, Fantastic Four, two issues. There was the Skrull Fantastic Four issues, and then Fantastic Four 286, which was Return of Jean. But otherwise, he kind of stayed out of the X-Men realm. Only Wolverine showing up in Alpha Flight for a couple issues, but not in the main way. Of course, Byrne came back to the X-Men on the Hidden Years, right? And that was flowing for him until came into some things with the Joe Quesada, and then after that, at some point after working at DC, I don't have Blood of the Demon, but there was the Doom Patrol that he was working on and a bunch of other DC books. And with those books, not really finding a big audience and finding an audience in the trades, Byrne kind of stepped away from comic books. And of course, Chris Ryall, the editor, dragged him into doing Angel, right? So he's doing Angel, and then we got a whole bunch of creator-owned books, Star Trek books. I can pull all those out, but at some point, he was kind of, he was stopping doing all that, stopping doing commissions. And then he decided, hey, let me do a couple X-Men pages. And many people know this story, but I will retell it, is that he did one X-Men page, which led to another and another. And with one issue done, a double-sized issue done, the editor-in-chief of Marvel said he wanted to get Byrne back onto the X-Men. And they talked about a publishing date when the book would come out. And by that time, nothing had happened. So Byrne had decided to release it. on his website. So the actual reason or why it didn't happen at Marvel regular comics, because they were doing a lot of retro books, is unknown, right? But Byrne ultimately said he wasn't going to do it with Marvel. He was just going to release it. And to words of all people, Rob Liefeld said, John has showed us the way. But he did about 32 issues, and I guess to kind of get personal, he was going, I guess, for some sort of thing at the hospital, some sort of thing, and he said he'd be back to it at some point later. And of course, being at the same time he had done so much work since he was younger, he once again, I think I said it before, one issue he said tools down, and he stopped mid on a cliffhanger in this web series. But he did about 32 issues, multiple cliffhangers, multiple crazy stuff. The energy is just building up and building up on this on this online X-Men series. But he found his love for the X-Men again, the new X-Men. This sort of period post him and leaving. So we got to see the Alpha Flight in this thing. We got to see the Imperial Guard, who's over here. Got Alpha Flight over here. Imperial Guard shows up, not in this volume, um, but those are things you're going to see, and some other bits later, because somehow it's online and people don't know anything about it. But at the same time, it's being bought up. Some you can find reasonable price ones, and you can find high price ones, because this is where the speculators have never left. They're somewhere out there, right? So we got this nice volume. There's two things outside of this history, right? Is that there is some complaints on the inking, but there's always complaints on Byrne's inking. It's been post X-Men, post Terry Austin, there's been complaints on the inking throughout his career. So the idea is that if they could keep, there was no way we're going to keep what Jim Lee does, somehow keep it looking like Jim Lee and Scott Williams his entire career. And Byrne's art hasn't stayed exactly the same, that throughout his entire career. He has allowed himself to shift, grow, change. The Byrne face that we know that he was criticized for, we can see it from time to time, but it's not always prevalent. It's not always the thing that they came down on. But at the same time, any complaints on the inking, we've been here too long. He's 75. How can people still be complaining about the inking? Even Joseph Rubinstein, who has done inked some pages and inked some commissions and talked about what he would do and this, that, and the other. They said, oh, they should. I'm going to go talk to them to get you to do it, to do the next volumes. And even Joseph Rubinstein, who's had an issue with Byrne from time to time, said, no, that man has a right to ink it himself. And that's the thing. If this is his last work, and this is the other part, is that, artists who have ink want to put pen to ink, right? And even here, when he was saying goodbye to the Hidden Years, because he knew it was canceled, the last couple pages he decided to ink, and he also wanted to ink one issue. So he did do that in this volume here, where it was like he had the inker he wanted, Tom Palmer. They were doing the work that he enjoyed. Byrne was inking covers, but he inked a full issue of the Hidden Years, and he also inked the last couple pages to say goodbye to the characters, right? So that's kind of that's what it is. That's what it's going to be. And at the same time, even for me, there is some things that would be rough, but as the time I keep looking, it's just like, falling back in love with this stuff. And at the same time, at some point, I still want to see an artist edition of the pencils. So you needed me to chime in on this. Excuse me for a second. Don't go anywhere. So last bit is that this is coming out as far as the actual shipping and going to stores, locations, Amazons. It's been selling out everywhere, and Abrams has said they haven't seen anything like this in their time in the business. And Byrne hopes the next two volumes also go through the same thing. But at the same time, with success, could mean more work from Byrne, even though he's 75. So keep your fingers crossed. Or I'll keep mine if I'm the only one here that that wants it. But at the same time, there is a controversy. Heather Antos, who works at IDW, she said to protest there should be a boycott against Byrne because Byrne had said some comments and or opinions about the trans community and that she felt was negative, and how could they support this during Pride, right? So ultimately, a lot of people have already dealt with this. I'm not going to get into a negative thing of attacking or doing anything like that, which is what's happening. But the boycott is not happening on Byrne's book. That's why this is at the tail end of this this video, right? And even a person who Byrne is going back and forth with, Rich Johnson from Bleeding Cool and Lying in the Gutters, the person who would say, "Oh, the Hidden Years is canceled. Oh, the Doom Patrol is canceled," right? And Byrne and him, went back and forth a couple times, and he's been the one to point out that Heather Antos is, almost has decided now to protest Byrne, even though she has an edition of the Star Trek, which includes work from Byrne. So I'm not sure if she got the notice a little bit late, but the comment she talked about is from ultimately many years ago, 2015, which would be almost 11 years ago. So it's kind of weird that this is coming up now. Now, Byrne is not a person who's a stranger to controversy, but it's interesting that with this work, I guess it would be the work that the hard part with any kind of boycott or controversy, and with the media, is if something is something that people want, then you're going to get pushback. So ultimately, Elsewhen is out there. I would say, without getting too much into the story, because you can purchase it. You can see the pencils. The script is in there and the pencils. The highlight for me at this point now is Kitty Kitty was a favorite of mine when I first was reading, when Byrne was doing it. And I think post Kitty's fairy tale, I think I started to fall out of love with Kitty. This Kitty is way different from Vision, and she's she's a kid, she's a normal kid, she makes mistakes, and she's it's tough to say because you can see I don't know, I'm gonna be honest here, right? What's the difference post Byrne and this? What's the difference, right? What's the difference? Claremont, we can't compare Claremont's X-Men Forever to this, right? Because it's a Claremont that's really was trying to do different things with the X-Men, right? Byrne is doing slightly different, but he's trying to stick. He's a big stickler on the characterization, right? But ultimately, we see some similarities of different things in between stuff that happened and didn't happen. Like in the Magneto issue, I think Kitty sneaks on to the Blackbird with the X-Men. So it's like there's some bits that have some similarities, but so you can see that they both had, a lot of energy. The big difference, we had the Sentinels done by Chris Claremont, and they get taken out by Nightcrawler. This tale has the full Sentinel drama in here of the Sentinels taking over, taking out. It's not supposed to be the Days of Future Past. The Days of Future Past was one Sentinel story, and this is another one, right? Even though this has the Savage Land with Wolverine, That's the first tale. But this is a big volume about the Sentinels, and the Sentinels, and Byrne does this, I think it's an 8-issue arc where the Sentinels take on the Marvel Universe, right? So it's a big Sentinel story. So we had, the end of what's the name where, I think it's Blyrich says, or Sentinels, and then we had that story that was hinted in the art of John Byrne. Do I have that? I have it somewhere here. But he doesn't do the full story because he was going to do smaller Sentinels, and they were going to be super tough Sentinels. But some of the bits are still there. But ultimately, go back to what I was saying. It's just funny to point out that there is some similarity between Byrne and Claremont. What Claremont did post Byrne, right after, and Elsewhen. Not exactly the same, but there is some similarities of dealing with some of the plots that they were being done, and the fact that the Imperial Guard show up. Because the Imperial Guard became a big part of this, but of course, having Phoenix in there means that we would, get to see the Imperial Guard, right? And then there's some surprises too, which we get a hint of in this issue, or the character that you see on this page that we never see, and I'll say he's in X-Men 108. So so the highlight, Kitty's one of the highlights because we get to see what Byrne was kind of going to do with Kitty and how her powers work differently from the Vision. The next big thing is Jean, right? So we get to see what that picture was when we see Jean with the pond with the flower, what Jean was going to be like. And the hard part for me in reading the new X-Men is that at some point I detached that the Phoenix was Jean, right, as a kid. And this is before reading Byrne's interviews. But at some point I kind of detached it because I think Jean was just a great character, and Phoenix was kind of spectacular, big spectacular character. And it was kind of like I lost my Jean that was, the linchpin to that. I mean, Cyclops is their leader, but she was kind of linchpin, and they did that in the Roy Thomas story where she left. And they were winning, but they'd have these things that go wrong, people get hurt, and they feel like they really needed Jean with them, right? And slowly she wanted to get back with them too, right? So this having Jean, even though she's going through a lot of struggles in this storyline, it felt like we had Jean back, even if she's struggling with her mind. The Phoenix, was just like Jean is gorgeous, and then Phoenix was just spectacular beyond. So it's like one issue in here where, for my mind, when Jean's in regular clothes, that kind of felt like Jean, right? Is this in here? Oh yeah, it is in here. This moment here, I know you can't see it, where you got Jean and Kitty Pryde once again. So you had Jean and Kitty interact, and that felt like a big X-Men moment. We already had it with Storm, but so in this, it'd be Kitty, Jean, Xavier, because I think Byrne is, making up for lost time with Xavier, because Byrne was the one to wanted Xavier out of the book early, and he realized, oh, he's a supporting character, and we got Xavier back around issue 125 of the regular run. He makes up lost time with Xavier, and what else? Is there anything else? And the fact that Kitty's interacting with Cyclops. In the Claremont one, that's the big difference. In what happened afterwards, Cyclops and Kitty didn't connect at all. So it's interesting as a leader, and Cyclops being someone who's a kid who was, running around being a superhero, he would take to Kitty, and like that was a shot here with Cyclops holding back Kitty from there, so it was a great sort of thing seeing Cyclops, whereas I think when Chris Claremont was doing it, Cyclops was kind of an outsider. He left the team, because of Jean. And then when he's coming back, he keeps saying, I don't think Kitty should be doing this. And Wolverine would be the one like, she's on challenge stuff all the time. So Cyclops, understands. Even when I first read the X-Men 131, I was really surprised Cyclops sent her into the fire, to the Hellfire Club. So I am totally jazzed. I don't know if you guys, well, there's a couple of that I'm a big X-Men fan. I mean, the guys on the show talk about me being an X-Men fan. So, as my mother would say, I've been in hog heaven reading the pencils, and now it's on great paper. I always complain about paper. It's on great paper. Is a Magneto can't escape a Byrne X-Men thing. He didn't escape the hidden years. Magneto shows up, but that's not the big story yet. So if you haven't read this, you got to get to the next one because it's going to be even crazier. It's going to be way crazier. Actually, I don't even know if you're going to get to it in the next one, probably in the third volume. But it's way crazier when you get to that, and you're going to be upset. You're going to be like, yo, I wasn't upset, but I know y'all are going to be upset. So, but at the same time, it was great seeing him go back to the X-Men, go back to these characters that at times he had said that he had fell out of love with. That he said that what he was doing and the plots he was doing, that stuff, their characters were showing up differently in the printed page with the dialogue. And if he didn't like what he was seeing, and that's what's getting printed, that he didn't like the X-Men. So the idea that he went back and he didn't immediately say, I want to do some more Hidden Years, which I would have loved. Because he had a whole bunch of stories. There's, Dr. Doom and them. I asked him about that. I asked him about, what's the name? X-Men and Lucifer. He said it was something like that. The Alpha Flight was supposed to show up in the Hidden Years. X-Men was supposed to meet the new X-Men. There's a bunch of stuff supposed to happen in that book. But I won't complain. I won't cry about that anymore. But we got X-Men Elsewhen. Chris Ryall hooked it up, figured it out. Byrne agreed, and we got it published, guys. But at the same time, Byrne's out there being interviewed saying this is his swan song. And there's a Times interview with Byrne coming out soon too. So this is why also the controversies happened, because he got picked up by the Hollywood Reporter, Forbes, and now the Times. So the person who, couldn't keep a book in his last books that he was doing, there was no buzz around this. Even him returning to the X-Men is a huge buzz for the community out there. So we'll leave you with that, is that Elsewhen is out there. There are people that have them. Hard part is, don't do Amazon. I did Amazon, and there's not much damage, but there was a corner on here that got kind of messed up. There was nothing in the Amazon package. Nothing. It was just in a box, and this is just like, do they have people here anymore? So if you can find some other reputable place, seems like there will be a second printing, so you can get that. Or if you want to go out there and get something that's good, there is a Scott Williams cover. That's the Midtown cover, and that sold out like that. So the talk of the ink, the color, the inking, or the writing, or all this other stuff, you're not a fan, there's no reason to be here. If you've moved on, you got the essentials. There's no need for what if you got Terry and what's the name to do it. And at the same time, the hard part between Claremont and Byrne is that Byrne has agreed to do work with Chris Claremont on X-Men Alpha and X-Men The End. And ultimately, they work together on, what's that book? On the Justice League. But the difference is that we don't have a Claremont calling up Byrne and saying, hey, do you want to do Huntsman with me? Maybe we get Terry Austin to ink, see what happens. and you do breakdowns. You get Terry on it and see what happens. That's what we needed to see at Image. Is what Chris Claremont was looking for the next guy because he was moving forward. He'd worked with Byrne. He wants to do some other people. So the idea of having them or forcing them back together has been, the two of them have gone on and built their careers and done a lot of different things. So putting the onus on one means that did Claremont call him up and say, I want to do this? No, no. It was Shooter that was calling him up and saying that, or even the you know right doing the Justice League and him planning on writing it, and they say, hey, what if we can get Chris Claremont to do it? He's like, yeah. He says, yes, yeah, fine. So we didn't get to work together on the X-Men in the end, and it happened. So that's it on this one. Can I say it's out here? Um, yeah, if you're a fan, you're an actual fan, you've been buying and reading stuff like me, you're gonna be delighted. If you've been, you want more of the X-Men essentials. This is a period in time, in from 77 to 80, 81. So it's kind of tough to ask those guys to do exactly the same. But as far as a storyteller, if this is the last hurrah, he's still a very extremely strong storyteller. And even with doing more of a Neil Adams style, this the only thing is when I had the larger edition of that, you might need a larger edition of this. I'm asking for more stuff. I'm sorry. I'm happy. I guess you don't see me get ecstatic. Maybe this is as far as I get. Maybe this is as far as I get. So, guess that's about it. Can I say, what else I want to say? There's some cool Wolverine stuff in here, but the stuff that's coming up next year, it's going to be crazy. It's gonna be. But anyway, but you also get the Avengers and Fantastic Four in here. You get a lot of stuff in this volume, and we haven't even got to the Phoenix. We haven't barely got to it. But I will say, there's a major shift. Is she there? Where is she? I'm still going on this video, so I should end it here. I guess I'm blocking. I don't see Lalandra. Where is she? Oh, there she is. Oh no, she's on this side right here. There's a major. Lalandra's motivations are a lot different than in what we saw in the X-Men and in general what happened afterwards. But I will say it gives you good reason why Lalandra came to Xavier and the X-Men. We finally have a connection for why she came to there, why she has the moment where she sees the Phoenix Force and she looks at it and she has a moment, and then why she is so gung-ho in trying to take out the Phoenix Force. So ultimately, I think I covered everything. What else could I say? Nightcrawler's in there too, and it's fun seeing Nightcrawler and Kitty. Not Kitty being afraid of Nightcrawler. It's just I think I'm done here, but definitely check it out. I don't know, can I do a critique after doing this video? I don't know if I can, but I think I gave you all the bits. Anything else I want to say about this? Better, worse, or that? I would say it's different. That's all I can say. But if you're an X-Men fan and you miss Byrne's X-Men, you got more Byrne X-Men. Spin Rack is